Welcome back now to the Middle East, where Turkish President Tayyip Erdogan has indicated that parliamentary and presidential elections could be held May 14, after he said the date should be brought forward from June 18. Speaking to lawmakers of his AK party in parliament, Mr. Erdogan said Turks will show their reaction to the main opposition alliance on the same date that elections were held in 1950. Turkish general elections were held on May 14 in 1950, when the Democratic Party became the ruling party, winning against the Republican People's Party, which had ruled Turkey since its founding. Elsewhere, United Nations Deputy Secretary General Amina Mohammed and a delegation to promote the rights of women and girls in the wake of a recent Taliban crackdown has met with former Afghan President Hamid Karzai in pictures released today. Photographs of the meeting were posted on Mr. Karzai's official Twitter page. The delegation, which arrived in Kabul earlier in the week, also include UN Women Executive Director Sima Bahous. Taliban-led authorities in Afghanistan last month ordered all local and foreign aid groups to stop letting female staff work until further notice. It followed a ban imposed earlier last month on women attending universities. Girls were stopped from attending high school in March. The UN Security Council met privately last Friday at the request of the United Arab Emirates and Japan to discuss the decisions by the Islamist Taliban-led administration, which seized power in Afghanistan August 2021. The United States pushed the 15-member council to adopt a resolution calling on the Taliban to reverse the bans on women. Meanwhile, the UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres has called on business leaders gathered at the World Economic Forum in Davos to follow the principles outlined by an expert group to make credible, accountable net zero pledges. Now, the United Nations and the standard setter and the International Organization for Standardization launched the guidelines in November to become a reference text and help organizations come up with solid plans, avoiding slogans, hype, and obfuscation. While companies are increasingly pledging to cut greenhouse gas emissions to as close as possible to zero, the benchmarks and criteria they use are often dubious or murky.
I call on all corporate leaders to... We are flirting with climate disaster. Every week brings a new climate horror story. Greenhouse gas emissions are at record levels and growing. The commitment to limit global temperature rise to 1.5 degrees is nearly going up in smoke. Without further action, we are headed to a 2.8 degree increase. Now, the truth is that more and more businesses are making net zero commitments, but benchmarks and criteria are often dubious or murky. And this can mislead consumers, investors, and regulators with false narratives. And it feeds a culture of climate misinformation and confusion, and leaves the door open to greenwashing. That's why we created an expert group on net zero emissions commitments. Recently, the group has issued a how-to guide for credible, accountable net zero pledges. And here at Davos, I call on all corporate leaders to act based on these guidelines, to put forward credible and transparent transition plans on how to achieve net zero, and to submit those plans before the end of the year. Now, the transition to net zero must be grounded in real emissions cuts and not relying essentially on carbon credits or shadow markets.
Well, staying with the annual meeting in Davos, Moderna Chief Executive Stefan Bancel says he would like to have factories making vaccines based on its messenger RNA technology in every continent as the US company prepares to build 4 facilities. Speaking on a panel at the World Economic Forum, he said the company is building or planning to build factories in Canada, Australia, Britain, and Kenya. Its COVID-19 vaccines are made right now in the United States and Switzerland.
We had a lot of export restriction during the pandemic, which was really, really painful for a lot of obvious reasons. Even from countries who say we will not limit exports, trust me, they were. And so we're very excited now that we are building a factory in Canada We already broke ground in the fall. We're building a factory in Australia. We are going to start a factory this quarter in the UK, and we're also going to start building a factory in Kenya. We're talking to a couple more countries because I would really like on every continent to have mRNA capacity, because the amazing thing about mRNA is you can use the same facility, the same plant, the same machines to make any vaccine you want.
Well, let's head to the UK, where a British wholesaler says food prices are the highest he has ever seen in his 40 years in the business. The managing director at Creed Food Service, Philip De Tarrant, said that a variety of issues have been affecting his price, from the war in Ukraine to climate change. Annual consumer price inflation fell to 10.5% in December from November's 10.7%. The Office for National Statistics said on Wednesday a drop in line with economists' forecast on a local poll.
In my 40 years in food service and wholesaling, I've never seen price increases, particularly food inflation, at levels and for the duration they have been for so long. Many issues are out of our control, whether that is the war in Ukraine with Russia, whether that is climate change with floods, heat waves, droughts, whether that is energy pricing, which is now 400% more than it was last year.
Meanwhile, Britain's Labour leader Keir Starmer has called on the Prime Minister Rishi Sunak to apologise over ambulance waiting times. During Prime Minister's questions, Mr Starmer described the Conservative government's handling of the National Health Service, NHS, as lethal chaos. People with emergencies waited more than 90 minutes on average for an ambulance at the end of 2022. That's according to data released by NHS England. The state-run National Health Service is under severe strain, with millions of patients on waiting lists for hospital treatments and emergency departments unable to see patients promptly.
Mr. Speaker, it's 3 minutes past 12. If somebody phones 999 now because they have chest pains and fear it might be a heart attack, when would the Prime Minister expect an ambulance to arrive?
Mr. Speaker, it's absolutely right that people can rely on the emergency services when they need them. And that's why we're rapidly implementing measures to improve the delivery of ambulance times and indeed urgent and emergency care. But I'd say to the honourable gentleman, if he cares about ensuring that patients get access to life-saving emergency care when they need it, why won't he support our minimum safety legislation?
Mr. Speaker, over the 40 minutes or so that these sessions tend to last, 700 people will call an ambulance. 2 will be reporting a heart attack. 4 will be reporting a stroke. But instead of the rapid help they need, many will wait and wait and wait. So if he won't answer any questions, will he at least apologise for the lethal chaos under his watch?
Well, domestically driven growth will be the key for China's economic performance in 2023. That's according to John Ross, former Director of Economic and Business Policy for Mayor of London. The Economist made the remarks in a programme speaking on high inflation, contractionary monetary policies and slow economy in the US and other major economies that will lead to the drop of external demands for Chinese goods and affect the country's export.
China, Japan, Singapore, Taiwan, they have been trying various things to have a higher growth rate in population. Primarily, this has been through financial incentives for having children. But we are also seeing that they have not been as effective as what we have seen in certain other countries like Germany and all, which have made childcare much more affordable, much more proximity, as in they are much nearer to the workforce, especially the female workforce, and also providing very innovative schemes such as allowing freezing of eggs for single women even. Such kind of innovative policies will have to be tried out. All these countries will continue to have declining growth rates, I would say. Yeah. So, India might grow, but still the growth rate will be less than what it used to be. I think there are subtle differences between the two countries, which is making this trend amplify itself. First of all, are religious differences. In India, certain religions have prohibitions against, say, contraception, or they encourage having children. That is one factor. Also, China happens to be far richer than India, and this is one big factor which has affected population growth rates. And also, you have a situation where women's employment or educational levels in China is far higher than what you see in India. And that's also another factor which is highly correlated with fertility rates and population growth.
He was also talking about reducing the pressure of raising a child, innovative policies such as allowing the freezing of eggs and others, which he says will reverse the decline in population. Well, still to come on the programme. Cats and dogs have less in Spain on St. Anthony's Day. I have details in a moment. Welcome back to the weather now. The golden lights of the Procuratie building reflected on the waters flooding St. Mark's Square transformed the iconic Venetian landmark into an ethereal postcard from another era. This was taken Tuesday at 100 centimetres. The seasonal high tide at 20:30 GMT was not enough to activate the Moose flood barriers, which protect the fragile city from flooding during the so-called aqua alta or high water. Venice's floods are caused by a combination of factors exacerbated by climate change, from rising sea levels and unusually high tides to land subsidence that has caused the ground level of the city to sink. We head to South Sudan, which is still struggling with a resurgence of intercommunal violence in the country. It has been worrisome for the UN mission in the country, and head Nicholas Haysom has emphasized the importance of elections for the country's stability. Mr. Haysom also says elections will allow the country move forward towards a peaceful and productive future.
It will be crucial that South Sudan meet all its critical benchmarks, particularly those that are time-bound, and this will require a sense of urgency in the coming year. As I shared with the Security Council, my fear is that slippages in meeting the timeframes will have a domino effect on key benchmarks that will be crucial down the line. Progress needs to be accomplished this year, 2023, not next year, and benchmarks that have been missed need to be recovered. The electoral process must be carried out in a secure environment, free from violence and intimidation. It must be complemented by the necessary political and civic space to allow for open dialogue, debate, and campaigning. This requires dealing with the fault lines and divisions that have fueled violence over the past decade. Self-evidently, those conditions are not here yet. Creating the environment where elections can take place requires South Sudanese to engage each other, putting the interests of the country first. This violence and fighting, disturbingly characterized by tribal undertones in many areas, is particularly damaging. It poses a real threat to the gains achieved so far and could even derail the peace process. Every one of these conflicts leaves behind a legacy of bitterness and division.
Into some entertainment now. Afrobeat frontrunners Burna Boy, Davido and Wizkid emerged biggest winners at the 2022 installment of the Africa Union's All Africa Music Awards on a night African brightest stars failed to make an appearance. The trio received their prizes in absentia, leaving fans in the host city Dakar, Senegal, disappointed. Our entertainment correspondent, Bidemi Dairo, tells us more.
The big night of African music celebration, the Africa Union's All Africa Music Awards held at the Dakar Arena in the capital city of Senegal, and some of the big names in contemporary African music walk away with the prestigious golden microphone trophies. Even though big-name acts, including Davido and the Grammy winners Burna Boy and Wizkid, were not present, they still picked up the big prizes of the evening.
We want Africa to embrace Africa. We had a big nightmare getting people on flights. Flying around Africa is not easy. To get to certain countries, sometimes you take two planes and a boat ride. I've done that before. So, we want to make it easier, and I hope that it becomes easier as the years go along. But also, we got to get corporate Africa. They're huge multinationals that operate across the continent. Africa needs your support. We got to get you on board. It is very important. We're in Senegal. We might be in Ivory Coast next. We might be in Kenya next. We might be in South Africa next. Who knows where we go? But we're going to be going around Africa for the next 10 years. I'm going to make sure that this grows. This is, forget the Grammys. This is Afrima. We're huge.
The self-professed African giant picked up the biggest prizes of Artist of the Year and Album of the Year. His fellow Grammy winner Wizkid took the golden microphone for Best West African Male in the regional category. Davido ended the evening with 3 prizes in the bag. One with Adekunle Gold for the track High in the Best in African Pop. Another with Focalistic on the Champion Sound in the Best Electric category. His final win is alongside the Sunday Choir for the track Stand Strong in the Best Inspiration category.
Et le gagnant du prix de la 8e édition de toute la musique africaine Afrima dans la catégorie de meilleur artiste masculin en musique inspirante de cette année est Davido featuring Sunday Service Choir from Nigeria. Make some noise for Davido, please!
Adekunle Gold followed up his win with Davido with a solo prize in the Best Artist in the African Contemporary category.
Mon pop africain cette année est Adekunle Gold. Et nominé son Black Shepherd, the Traveler, Ghana, Burna Boy, Last, Nigeria.
Ghanaian singer Black Sheriff and Nigerian singer Asake, who had beautiful runs in 2022 with numerous monster hit singles, lost in the Song of the Year and Breakout Artist of the Year categories respectively. While the Kweku singer lost to Ivorian singer DDB, Asake lost to Marwan Musa from Egypt. Self-professed #1 African bad girl Tiwa Savage, who was present at the event, lost the Best Artist in R&B and Soul prize, but singer Thames got the better luck as she won the Best Movie Soundtrack with the Black Panther Wakanda Forever prologue, No Woman, No Cry.
Ghana, Thames and Marvel, No Woman, No Cry. Black Panther Wakanda Forever prologue EP, Nigeria.
The winner is Thames and Marvel from Nigeria.
And talking about Nigerians, some of them have been lamenting the difficulty in getting their permanent voter cards ahead of next month's election. They're worried they could be disenfranchised if their cards are not ready by the new deadline given by INEC. Our correspondent Timothy Crown went around Lagos, the commercial capital, to observe the process and report.
It's less than 2 weeks to the January 29th new deadline given by the Independent National Electoral Commission for voters to collect their permanent voter cards. The turnout of voters have been impressive in some collection centers across the country, and that's the account of INEC. Yet some others are not so, recording low turnout. At the Dairy Farm Senior Secondary School, one of the collection centers on the mainland area of Lagos, there are just a handful of residents.
For me, it wasn't so difficult, but I hear a lot of my friends saying that it was quite difficult. They had to wait in line and queue and the struggle. But when I came here, I think there wasn't a queue, except for the fact that I had to travel down here and find out where I had to travel down to.
It's a similar experience in some parts of town. There may be bigger challenges as some Nigerians wonder why their cards are not yet ready in spite of the approaching deadline.
When they now release that we should go to our various wards to go and check if our cards are ready. So I went to my ward, I checked their file. The file says my card is ready before distribution. So when I now came, when the distribution date commenced, I came to check. I didn't see. This is my third time of coming to check. I didn't see.
It's where some persons are asked to return for the card when the deadline may be over.
2011, they gave us the laminated cards after registration, and they said we could vote with those cards. Now in 2015, they asked us to go and get those cards, that they were going to print the actual card itself. It wasn't printed, so I couldn't vote. 2019, they had to tell me I was not on the database. I had to register again, and the card was not still printed. Now 2021, I went to register under Etiosa, and I went for my card. They said I'm not on the database. The card was not printed. I had to go and look for my old card on the mainland.
The turnout is not any better on the island in Lagos. These are some of the challenges that bother the mind of some lawyers under the Aegis Nigerian Voters Watch.
The majority of people have not collected their PVCs still. And I had a personal experience, not because they said so. I registered last June. And I remember they said we should come back October of last year to pick up our PVCs. I went in October, they said come back in November. I went in November, they said it's not ready, come back next week. I went that day, they said come back in 2 weeks. I went the fourth time, they said they can't find my name. I tried to protest, but I noticed it was useless.
One of the solutions the lawyers are proffering is for the Independent National Electoral Commission to allow every registered voter vote, PVC or not. As the countdown continues, one hopes that the issues around the collection of the cards are resolved in good time. Timothy Crown, Aderibigbe, Channels Television News.
Nada.
Nada, bendice señora Nara.
And finally on the program, we are back in Spain, where hundreds of pet owners took their pets to church, where they were blessed by priests marking St. Anthony's Day, the patron saint of animals, January 17. In Madrid, Father Angel Garcia of St. Anthony's Church delivered mass in front of dozens of pets as dogs backed from the pews. Begona, the owner of 11-year-old Coco, said her cat had avoided death 3 times thanks to St. Anthony's protection. St. Anthony, the abbot, is considered the patron saint of animals because he is depicted as a person who cared and protected them.
Entramos un poco. Sí. La llevo a misa.
And that's our program this evening. Thank you for watching. I'm Millicent Walker.